Hi, I'm Dwight Amory, President of the Maryvale Revitalization Corporation.
Hi, my name is Billy Rhymes. I'm the chair of the Maryvale Partnership in Action. The Maryvale Partnership in Action was created over 5 years ago to help provide information on domestic violence. The Maryvale Partnership in Action has over 60 members from government, private agencies, and community members. The Maryvale Partnership in Action hopes that you find this video informative and empowering to help you fight domestic violence in your community.
We're here today at the University of Advancing Technology, who's partnered with us to be able to bring you this video, Keeping Families Safe. Funding for the program was made available through the John F. Long Foundation and the City of Phoenix Block Watch Grant.
What is your emergency? Excuse me. Yeah? Yes, my dad. My mom was there. My dad came and he hit my mom real hard. Your dad hit your mom? Yeah, he was hitting her a lot. Okay, is he still there? Yes. He is still there? He hit him a brown car. And he hit my dad a lot. He hit him against the wall, a brick wall. What's your address? I want to say that. 2013. Okay, did your mom just go to a neighbor's house just a minute ago? Yes. Okay. For the project, he just hit her. She has a big boot, and she's bleeding a lot from her nose. My dad hit her a lot. He hit her a lot? Yes. Okay. I'm scared. That's okay. Just stay on the line with me, okay? Okay.
You just heard that. That's why we're here today. Welcome, and thank you for being here, is to keep families safe. Today's goal is to learn more about domestic violence, understanding those dynamics of what abuse is, and kind of clarify and break down the myths of what abuse is. Unhealthy relationships could be your wife, it could be your husband, it could be young, old, could be your in-laws, your brother or sister. It could be somebody in a past relationship. So then who are the abusers? Once again, anybody. Male, female, young, old, somebody working in a blue collar. Domestic violence does not discriminate. Power and control. What happens? They strip that victim of their self-esteem. Gets them so low. So let's talk a little bit more about some of those characteristics, okay? When we talk about a power control and domestic violence, it's a wheel, okay? It's like a pie. So what are some of those? One of them, physical abuse, okay? That's the most common that people think. But there's also some other ones, emotional abuse, okay? That's where they get to the victim, break down their self-esteem, okay? There's also economic abuse, even sexual abuse. Okay, economics. Okay, let's go back to that. Controlling the money. Okay, maybe you're working. Okay, but who they want you to turn in their check to them. Okay, how about intimidation? Okay, abuse. If you start a relationship, somebody comes up and hits you, you're not going to remain in that situation, are you? So what happens? Intimidation tactics. What happens first? They start breaking a plate. Okay, they get up in your face. Those are intimidation factors. Citizenship. Okay, I'm going to call the immigration. I'm going to report you. Again, what's happening? What do you guys hear? They're instilling that fear. Why? Because they want to have that power, that control. Okay? Threats. Threats become realistic. We have physical, emotional, the economics, sexual abuse, even isolation, keeping you from your family, your friends. You're only allowed to work and back, to the groceries and back. And let's not forget about the verbal abuse, that psychological abuse. A bruise might disappear in a couple of days, but the verbal, our little minds are like little recorders. They keep remembering those name callings. Okay? That, again, Starts breaking down your self-esteem. Power and control. That's what the abusers want. So going back just a little bit, if we can define it, power and control. Okay? So some of those myths, okay? Is violence is it only physical? Well, we know it's not. Okay, the intimidation. The other myth, though women continue to be that majority of victims, and there are cases nationwide, there's still a growing number of the men that are also being abused, that go underreported. We know children can be, maybe your grandmother, your grandfather, the elder. And it doesn't only happen to poor people. That's another misconception that we have. Every class, every race, every cultural group in society. There's actually a document that says 50 reasons the woman stays. One of them, what happens? Their lack of esteem has been affected. Maybe they don't have the education. Another one is they just don't know where to go for those resources. Those are just a few reasons why the woman stays. Maybe their immigration status, the children. What's my family gonna think? Those are realistic reasons of why the victim will stay in the relationship. Power, control, those are unhealthy relationships. Some of the myths, remember that. And have you stopped to think, everybody says, why doesn't she leave? Well, have you stopped to think, why does he hit her? Or why does she hit him? Because we know that victims are also male. So let's change our focus on that. There are reasons why she can't just get up and go. So we talked about unhealthy. Let's go talk about healthy relationships. So power and control, we know, is domestic violence. So we also have what we call a equality wheel. What's in that wheel? Respect, communication, honesty, trust, trusting that individual. Shared responsibility. The money part, again, the economic portion of it, it's combined, it's shared. You're able to communicate without any fear. What's he gonna think if I say, okay, equality? Healthy relationships is what we want to see. This is what you need to tell them. You're scared for their safety. It's not their fault, and they're not alone. Nobody deserves to be abused. Not your grandmother, not your friend. You certainly don't deserve to be abused. Keeping the family safe. What do you need to do? Take some action. Let's break that cycle. Break the silence. Domestic violence is a crime. And everybody deserves to live with some respect and not fear in your own homes. So how can what would be one first step for somebody to take if they're in that situation? Orders of protection. How many of us have heard of an order of protection? Injunctions against harassment. Keep in mind, again, it's only a piece of paper. It is only one tool. It's not going to stop a bullet, but it's effective. It's an effective tool if it's enforced. Okay? It has to be enforced. Does not guarantee your safety. It's not a shield from that bullet. And what does it cost? It really only costs your time. It's free when you're in a relationship. Orders of protection, you can go to any local municipal court. City of Phoenix, there's advocates there. Any justice of the peace. You can go to the county family superior court. We have a family advocacy center. You don't even have to go down to court. It's all through a monitor. And an advocate will be with you the entire time. The only thing to keep in mind with orders of protection is if you're going through a divorce or any kind of custody family court issue, you will have to go down to superior court to obtain that. But again, contact an advocate. Contact the Family Advocacy Center. Phoenix Prosecutor's Office. They have advocates there. So today, think about, again, I just gave you some basic information about domestic violence, the characteristics. And when you think about somebody in an abusive relationship, it's just not that easy. And don't forget there's resources out there, there's help. Nobody deserves to be abused. And with that, I'm going to introduce our Phoenix City Prosecutor, Aaron Carriona-Inza.
Thank you, Gwen. Here we have the beginning of a list of particular crimes that can be committed, and if they are committed in Arizona within a relationship that is defined as domestic violence, that's a crime of domestic violence. It includes additional penalties above and beyond the normal penalties. And you can see endangerment is at the top of the list, because oftentimes that happens when a father is driving a child in a car and he drives recklessly, or in any other circumstance where it endangers the life or limb of someone in a domestic violence relationship. As Gwen discussed, it could be a husband, it could be an elderly or a parent of any age. Threatening and intimidating. You recall that Gwen talked about how it is all about power and control, and how a person can maintain power and control over another through threats, causing fear in that person by threatening or intimidating. Say the man is 6'2" and weighs 250 pounds, and the girlfriend is 5'2" and weighs 105 pounds. It doesn't take much. It's just that movement towards that person. And what does that wife or girlfriend do? She backs up, she cowers, she allows him to control her. She talked about controlling the way you live your life, whether you're allowed to see your friends anymore, because he has this jealousy that is uncontrollable. Assault of any kind, injury or no injury. You know, it's an assault if I touch you without your permission. I don't have to leave a mark. Now, it's an assault of the aggravated circumstance if I break your arm. Now, that's a felony in Arizona. Or I punch you in the face and the bone around your eye is broken, which isn't very difficult to do. Custodial interference is another. If the court has determined that the wife has custody of the child and the husband won't abide by it and takes the child when he doesn't have the right to do that, that's a crime of domestic violence. Certainly kidnapping, we all know what that means. If it's done within that relationship, that's a crime as well. Trespassing, when a person goes to a place that he doesn't have a right to go. Let's say we have an order of protection that says do not go within 300 feet of the place where the wife works, or the school where the child goes to school, or the home where the person lives. In addition to it being a violation of the order of protection, it's also a violation of the law that protects people from trespassers. Interfering with judicial proceedings. Anytime a judge orders someone to do something and the person doesn't do it, that's an additional crime. Disorderly conduct. Let's say husband and wife, Mary and Joseph, are having a fight, and it's very loud, and pots and pans are being thrown, and doors are being slammed, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, and the people next door can't sleep. That's disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace. If it's done within that relationship, that's domestic violence. Now, there are crimes that people commit by using telephones to do all the things we talked about, whether to intimidate or to offend or to harass or to threaten or just annoy. Suppose that husband, that boyfriend, is so insecure that he calls his wife's or his girlfriend's place of employment and calls 15 times a day and hangs up. That's very annoying. What's his intention when he does that? Harassment. Anytime someone is harassed, that's a violation of the law. If it's done within the relationship covered by domestic violence, it likewise is a crime of domestic violence. Stalking. We all hear about stalkers. We know what that is. It's something that people ought to be protected from, and in Arizona we have a law that says stalking is a crime. And if it's, again, if it's done within the relationship of domestic violence, that's a crime of domestic violence, and you have a right to be protected from it. Surreptitious photographing. You recall you were asked, do we have a right to photograph you? If you said no, we wouldn't photograph you. So you have a right to privacy, and in that domestic violence situation, you have a right to be free from being photographed. We all hear about people photographing people without their knowledge when they're doing very private things. The law in Arizona protects people from that. We have a growing population of elderly people who are vulnerable. They can't take care of themselves very well. And sometimes within those relationships of father and son, elderly father, the son doesn't behave like a loving son, a caring son. And he hurts in some fashion that vulnerable adult. Vulnerable adults in Arizona have a special status of protection, and domestic violence is one of those avenues by which we protect people. Now, let's talk a little bit about the process. In a typical case of domestic violence, it starts with what you heard at the beginning of the program, and that is a 911 call. In this instance, it was a child. A child in fear for harm to his mother, terrified by that. It starts with that 911 call and the response by a police officer. He goes to the scene and investigates. If the person who is the aggressor, the perpetrator, most often the male in the relationship, is present, he obviously will be interviewed by the police officer, as will the victim be interviewed. And at the conclusion of that investigation, if it's determined that someone was the aggressor and the police officer believes that a crime was committed, of domestic violence in particular, that victim will be given a booklet with information about about rights that she has as a victim. And chronologically, in order of not importance, but in order of time, the first time that she can exercise a right is by telling that officer, I invoke my right as a victim. I want to receive notices of all the court proceedings. And the police officer will inform the victim, I am booking your boyfriend. I am taking him to jail now. Within 24 hours, he will appear before a judge. You have a right to be present when the judge arraigns the defendant, your boyfriend. We'll discuss what the purpose is of the arraignment in just a second. But it's important for you to know and for you to tell your friends that the victim of domestic violence has a right to be in the courtroom. The courtroom will be in the jail. And she has a right to talk to the judge. Now, why is that so important? Because a victim needs to be heard when the victim has something to say. Now, what might that victim want to talk to the judge about? Well, what's going on in that relationship? To help the judge make a decision. Do I let him go home? Do I believe that he will report to court the next time he's supposed to be in court? Do I need some kind of security, usually dollars and cents, a bond, upon which I can rely as the judge that he will be in court when he's supposed to be there the next time? But it's important for you all to know that you can be there and you can tell the judge, this is how dangerous he is. I don't want you to let him go. Please, if you do, order him not to return to the house or to my place of employment, to stay away from the children. And you can tell the judge what happened. Not because he's going to be convicted of the crime then and there, but because the judge needs to make a decision based on knowledge as to whether to release that person who's accused of domestic violence. That's critical. Because what is the most important thing at that moment that that victim needs? Protection. And that's what the judge does. He can order him to stay away. Now at the arraignment, the purpose of the arraignment is not only for the victim to be able to voice her opinion as to what should happen with the defendant regarding his release, but it's important because the Constitution provides everyone accused of a crime has certain rights. And at the arraignment, the judge will discuss those rights with the defendant in detail to ensure that, number one, he understands why he's in jail. What has he been accused of? To understand that he has a right to a lawyer, he has a right to be silent, not say anything to anybody, except answer the judge's questions. The ultimate question is, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty? And after the judge goes through that discussion with him, he enters a plea. He can, of course, enter a plea of guilty. Say, Judge, I'm sorry, I did it. I will accept responsibility. I need help. Where can I find help, Judge? I'm out of control. Whatever the case may be. Or he may say, no, Judge, I didn't do anything. I want a trial. And if he does that, that's fine, because we'll ultimately have a trial. It's also important for people to understand that the defendant in those circumstances has a right to a lawyer, and he will have a lawyer present there with him to help him make those decisions. There's a public defender there. That doesn't mean he needs to speak to the public defender. He can say to the judge, I'm going to hire my own lawyer, Judge. And that's all the judge needs to know regarding his right to the defendant's right to counsel. But if the person pleads not guilty and says, I want a trial, what happens next? Well, he's ordered to return to court, normally the courthouse in Phoenix. It's at 300 West Washington. And there he will see a judge, and he'll see a prosecutor, and he can talk to his lawyer. That's a pretrial stage. He can read the police report at that time, learn what the evidence is against him, who the witnesses are, what they say, that sort of thing. And very importantly, he can discuss with the prosecutor how to resolve it. How do we handle this case now? I've been accused of assault and trespass and criminal damage because I broke the door down. How do I resolve this? So the prosecutor can offer him a plea, an agreement, what the sentence is going to be, how long it's going to take, that sort of thing. In Phoenix, what we have is a domestic violence diversion program that provides education and treatment to people. Because when we think about this notion of power and control, we have to think about, why is it? What is it that motivates this person to want to control so much the life of another person that he's willing to violate the law, that he's willing to harm her, break down the door, punch her in the nose, rip the phone off the wall when she's trying to call 911, terrify the children who are 3 years old and 5 years old and 8 years old watching this go on day after day. What is his problem and how do we solve it? And that's what the diversion program attempts to do. Through education and counseling over a period of weeks, dealing with the problem, to help him realize that those things that are allowing him to behave in such a fashion are things he can control. Whether it's his alcohol use or some other drug, or maybe it's that he is so frustrated because he can't find a job that he's so jealous he doesn't believe he can control. and he's so insecure. Whatever the case may be, let's deal with that at the root. And that's what we try to do through the diversion program, as well as the judge. Now, at that pretrial conference, it's important for you to know that you as a victim have a right to be there. The prosecutor's office, if you invoke your rights, if you say, I want to be told of the court settings, you will be told by the prosecutor's office where and when to be for that pretrial conference. Because what are the things that can happen in a pretrial conference? Well, the defendant can say, Judge, I want a trial. That's all there is to it. And we schedule a trial in the future. Or he can say, Judge, I throw myself on the mercy of the court. I want to come clean. I plead guilty. Or he can sign a plea agreement with the prosecutor that will then resolve the case according to the plea agreement, whatever the sentence might be. In some instances, long jail time. In some instances, not so long jail time. In all instances, some kind of treatment, some kind of education to help that person come under control. But you have a right to be there, to consult with the prosecutor, and also address the judge if there's going to be a sentencing in particular. Because the judge wants to hear from you. Because you're part of this also. This isn't just some isolated person who did something that didn't affect anybody else. It affects the family of the victim. When you think about power, control, intimidation, when you think about the economic challenges that people have today in today's world, the man loses the job, the wife has never worked out of the home, they have 4 children between them. Who puts food on the table? Those are real problems. And the person wearing the black robe has to consider those. And he can only consider them when he hears from everybody, including the victim. Now suppose he says, I want the trial. I didn't do it, Judge. She caused it, or whatever his defense is. He gets a trial. And what that means is that the state, the prosecutor, is going to have to prove the charge. Criminal damage, broke the door down. He's going to have to prove to the satisfaction of the judge beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed those crimes. It's a fair trial because he gets an opportunity to speak himself if he wants to, or he may remain silent. Or he can present witnesses. They might be his employer to say, oh, Joe is a fine young man. He's just got some problems, Judge. I really don't believe he's capable of breaking down the door, etc. But he doesn't have to present any evidence. He just has a right to. It'll be up to him to decide whether to present evidence. The burden is on, the responsibility is on the prosecutor to prove the case, and that's done through witnesses. Witnesses. How do we prove the case? Suppose someone says 6 months from now, no, you weren't at the university that morning. You were in Timbuktu. How would you prove that? Well, you'd subpoena us all to testify that, yes, you were here, we were there. How do you prove the case? You prove it with witnesses. And usually, who is the witness to domestic violence? The perpetrator and the victim. Maybe a young child. But more often than not, when it actually happened, it's just 2 people. The judge is going to say, who's here to tell me what happened that date? I'm sorry, Judge, our witness isn't here. And that happens so often that it's distressing as a prosecutor. The prosecutor's role is to ensure safety of people. And when the victim does not appear and the prosecutor can't present the case, what happens? The case is dismissed. And the perpetrator walks out the door. To do what? We can only imagine. That's why it's so important for people to understand that there is help, as Gwen spoke about. Now, Gwen is an outstanding victim advocate. She has lived through people's lives for years, understanding what are the pressures. And it is people like Gwen who can help victims gain the fortitude, the strength, the self-confidence to stand up and say, no, you're not going to do that again to me, and I am going to court. What happens after the trial, assuming we have a trial and we convict the person of domestic violence? The sentencing. Again, it's another stage where the victim has a right to be present. Why? Because the judge needs to hear from the victim. What happened? Because the judge needs to know, she needs to understand, how do I help this family? Is it treatment? Is it education? Is it substance abuse? Is it control of jealousy? What is it? And again, it's so important that the victim be there. And she has a constitutional right to be there. So people need to understand that and exercise those rights. And if there is any reason on the part of a victim to fear going to court, Gwen is there. Victims advocates are there to help. She can make arrangements with us to have an advocate with her all that time. Meet her at the court, a taxi drive to the court if she doesn't have some transportation. We can provide that, to hold her hand, because that's what she really needs. And I'm not just talking about the victim as in the adult, but the children as well. Oftentimes we have young children with us, and Gwen and her assistants work with them and take care of them. We have toys and movies and things like that. So we try to do everything we can to help. You know, she did talk about, what if you know someone in a relationship of domestic violence and you're not quite sure what to do? Call us. Call Gwen, talk to her. As you can see on the screen, your rights are critical. The victim advocate can explain the rights and show you how to protect and exercise your rights. They can explain all the proceedings in detail. If you want to, you can come to court in advance of the hearing so you familiarize yourself with it. Talk to a prosecutor. Sit in the witness chair. Has anybody sat in a witness chair? I sat in the witness chair one time after years of being in the courtroom trying cases, and I was not very comfortable. It was a different place I had never been. And people were asking me questions, and I wasn't very comfortable. I can just imagine what it's like for a person who's only seen a courtroom on television. Never sat in the witness chair and taken an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. That's a frightening thing, especially when right over there at that table is the man who punched me in the nose, gave me the bloody eye, the bloody nose and the black eye, and had my children so fearful that they didn't know what to do. So fearful that a teacher, the nurse from the school, calls me and says, something's wrong with little Joey. So, why do I say that? Because we're available 3 weeks before the trial. You can come to court, sit in the witness chair, go through the whole process so you realize it's okay. We will help you. Gwen and all those folks in the Victim Advocacy, Family Advocacy Center that she mentioned are there to help, to explain things to you, to help you get an order of protection. The safety plan. That's really important. It's not something you just wake up one morning and say, I'm leaving, I'm going. Well, I guess you can do that. But you want to do it in a safe way. so that you can succeed, because you don't want him racing after you on the freeway in a rage. Bad things happen in those circumstances. Very horrible things happen in those circumstances. We've had instances where the victim has moved to California and she thought she was safe. And then we read in the newspaper what happened. The husband found out where she was, found her at the McDonald's parking lot, and killed her. Horrible. We need to avoid that. But you know, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. Now, where can we go? There are some additional resources that we ought to talk about. And one is relative to refugees and immigrants. We have a growing population of people that come here from other countries for any number of reasons. And they fear being found out by the authorities. So one of those threats is, you call the police. I'm calling ICE. You'll be gone in the morning. Well, that will cause anybody to stop and say, whoa, I'm not sure I'm going to do this. Maybe I'll take another beating. I'll just try to protect myself in any way I can. Well, the law in the United States allows you, if you come forward and assist in prosecution, allows you to request a U visa. There's a law in Arizona called the landlord-tenant law. If your name is on that lease, what does it mean that your name is on the lease? You owe money every month, right? You have 3 children. You don't have a place of employment. The husband does, and he's controlling you. You say, gosh, I can't leave here. I still owe the $800 a month. Well, that's not the case in Arizona, because victims of domestic violence can terminate that lease and not be bound by it anymore. And the other part of it is, your credit is not affected by it. The law does not allow those 3 credit bureaus to put that on your record, that you left and you broke the lease. Here are 3 other places you can go to seek help, and you can help your neighbors and your friends and your family members. I hope we've covered some things that you find valuable for you to understand and to know about. And if you have questions, we can answer them now, or just give us a call.
Aaron, how many domestic violence cases are investigated by the police department annually?
Every year, the Phoenix Police Department investigates 15,000 cases. That's a pretty significant number, isn't it? We know that it's underreported, that there are women who are in danger far in excess of 15,000 times every year in Phoenix. Phoenix is a large city. It's over 500 square miles. It's over 1.25 million people. So when you think about it, and when you reflect on what Gwen was talking about, power, control, intimidation, the fear, the factors that work against that victim calling the police.
Aaron, does your office prosecute all the domestic violence cases in the city of Phoenix?
Our policy is not to drop cases once we file them, in spite of what the victim may want us to do. It's very common for victims to say, I don't want to prosecute, but it's a violation of the law, and we stand there to protect the victims. So in spite of that, we will continue to prosecute the case. There are other cases that are prosecuted by the county attorney's office, and those are cases that are felonies. For instance, the assault in which there results a broken arm. We don't have the jurisdiction in the City Court of Phoenix nor through the Prosecutor's Office of Phoenix to prosecute felonies. Felonies are cases that result in people going to prison. The jail terms that defendants face in City Court through the Prosecutor's Office of Phoenix are limited to 6 months in jail, and that's the limit for misdemeanors.
Oh, excuse me.
That's okay. Just stay on the line with me, okay?
Okay.
We hope you have found this to be a valuable teaching tool in the education of your community and applaud you for helping keep families safe.